Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Vedya Dravidam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Yatha sarvani bhutani pratibhandi stitani cha yatraivo vashamam yanti tasmai satyatmane namaha. So, Mark, where are we in our text tonight?
We're on starting chapter 13 on page 131, number 1.
Chapter 15, page
13. 13.
13, page
31.
131. Puneet, can you help us out?
Trayodashah Sargah, chapter 13. Prahladopakhyanah, the story of Prahlada. Section 1. Haritoshanam, the satisfaction of God Hari. Vasishta Uvacha Athemam Paramam Ramam Vijnana Dhikame Katham Shrinu Daityeshwar Siddha Prahlada Swatmana Yatha. Vasishta said, Rama, hear now this, the most excellent manner of acquisition of spiritual knowledge, as Prahlada, the king of the demons, achieved by himself.
So we certainly have lots of kings of the demons. Now let's see how this particular king of the demons attained knowledge. Now, one of the reasons that it's so important that we have these stories, most of us think, oh, you've got to be like Nachiketas, very pure Brahmin boy, goes off, total renunciate to Lord Yama. But you and I, well, we have character defects. We mess up in life. In Gita, we're starting 16th chapter, Divine and Devilish Estate. This is about taking inventory. These are my character assets. These are my challenges. And most of us are in the middle. We'll go back and forth at times. So the point that we're getting at is you can be an asura, a rakshasa, a demon, and still attain liberation. So let's see about this fellow Prahlada.
Prahlado chintayad drishtva danavan harinahatam hare akramane nunam harireva hi sadhanam tameva sharanam yayam iti nischintya madhavam manasa pujayamasa sambhara bharina. Prahlada, having witnessed the demons killed by God Hari, reflected as follows. In approaching or overcoming Hari, certainly only Hari is the means. Let me go to him for refuge. End quote. Thus, having determined he worshipped Madhava or God Hari mentally by a heavy collection of requisites.
So there's a lot of secret wisdom hidden in this verse. So demons are supposed to overcome the gods. How do you overcome the gods? The only way to overcome Hari, Lord, is by Lord Vishnu himself. What is the definition of a character defect, or if you will, of sin? Not something behavioral necessarily. I'm going to give you what I think is the best definition of a character defect, a klesha, a dosha, a sin. Anything that separates us from the love of God or the love of our fellow human beings. That's a problem. Any thought or action that separates me from the love of God or the love for my fellow human beings is an affliction, klesha, is a defect, dosha, is papa, is sin. So, how do we overcome it? Okay, God, I'm now willing for you to have all of me, good and bad. How do we deal with the sense of separateness from God? Give that sense to God. It's a paradox. So here, Prahlada does exactly that same kind of practice. What does he do? He's been losing the battle. He begins intense worship of God. Any thoughts about this? What's our part in this process? Our part in this process is to become aware. We three have been studying Yoga Sutra, and there's a secondary definition of swadhyaya. One definition is self-study of the scriptures and how it applies to our life. But in the text that we've been discussing with that commentary, he adds to it knowledge of our own psychological material, self-understanding with a small s, self-analysis. So I'm conscious of what my various issues are. Some of us may think I can take a baseball bat to them and fix them. I've never found that effective. Give them to God. and what we were talking about last night in Gita. I love what St. Augustine says. Pray like it all depends on God, but work like it all depends on you. So we have to cooperate with grace. It's a paradox. All right, going on,
I have a question.
please.
So, this idea of giving it to God is foreign to me. And you say go through the motions, just sort of do it
Well,
by
don't
rote.
you have an understanding of God?
I guess sort of
Who do you think's running the universe? Trump?
no.
Who do you think's running the universe?
I suppose if you want to say someone's running it, God is running it.
Yeah. And that God can be to whom it may concern. You don't even have to have an idea. But one of the ideas in yoga, we have consciousness, Brahman, neuter noun, Prajnanam Brahma. Brahman is consciousness. But part of the nature of Brahman, one of Brahman's first manifestations, is this intelligence that is the controller of everything. In Sanskrit, we usually use the word Ishvara, usually translated as the Lord.
Right.
But etymologically, it comes from ichati, he who wishes, he who wills, he who is, or she, who is the controller of everything. We can talk a little bit more offline if you want on that.
Okay.
But the point that I'm getting at is, if I think I'm going to fix myself by my own will, that's only part of it. Of course, we have what we call purushartha, paurusham, our own self-effort. But all the scriptures say, but it's God's grace. We cooperate. So there is a salvific principle in the universe. Truth is, Mark, the universe conspires for our well-being, for our happiness, for our enlightenment, if we let it.
Yeah.
Can I share a little bit about what we're talking about this afternoon, Mahip?
Sure.
So Mahip's been telling me he's waking up in the morning and he's just filled with happiness and joy. Is it because you're making a whole lot more money?
No.
Is it because you've got a bigger house?
No.
Is it because you've got a fancier title?
No.
What's causing it?
Nothing.
Well, then why weren't you as happy before?
It's me. I am happiness.
It is the self in you. But as the mind lets go of its control issues and surrenders to the flow of life, we begin to be happier. Let's put this on the shelf for now. Going on.
Ratnau Ghapatra Patalaihi Chandanaadi Vilepanaihi Dhupai Deepai Pavitraishva Nana Vibha He worships mentally by a multitude of gems and heaps of vessels, by unguents such as sandal, by pure incenses, by waving of lights, and by ornaments of various excellences.
So he does traditional Hindu worship like arati, puja. Now, one of the things, again, Mahip and I were talking about earlier today, we were talking about the philosophical definition of a fetish. We don't mean the Freudian or sexual understanding. A fetish is some object to which you imbue awe or the sacred. And it's a way of focusing belief. So for a Hindu worshiping God with these particular ritual objects, those are the fetishes. You go to a Catholic church and they're going to have communion, wafer, wine. You go to the synagogue, got the Torah, march around the synagogue with it up in the air. People treat it with awe, the word of God. And the point I'm getting at here, it really doesn't matter what it is. These become ways of focusing faith, focusing belief, opening the heart. So Friday, we're going to go hear Krishna Das. Very different words than, say, a Taizé service. Anybody here ever been to a Taizé service? Taizé community started in France. It is essentially Christian, but it's kind of Christian kirtan. Marvelous stuff, short songs, repetitive. You get in that trance-like devotional state. The names of God are different. Practice is pretty identical. Anyway, so Prahalada engages in intense devotional practice. For him, it's devotion to Hari. Going on.
Atha tasmin pure daitya tata prabhriti vaishnavaha sarva eva bhavan bhaktya rajahya chara karanam. Then all demons in that city henceforward became worshippers of Vishnu only with devotion. For it is the king who is the cause of the conduct of his subjects.
So, what happened when King Ashoka became a Buddhist? India became Buddhist. What happened when Henry VIII broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and made himself head of the Church of England? England became Protestant. So people tend to follow leaders in the political sphere, both positively and negatively, by the way. So going on.
Oh, there's a note, I missed a note.
Okay.
Hari, Madhava, and Vishnu are names of God as protector or sustainer in the Hindu Trinity.
Yes.
Should I read the next one?
Going on.
Shrutvaita Vismata Deva Pravachu Bhogishayanam Krime Tat Bhagavan Dyaitya Viruddha Tvam Upasate Varako Danavo Hina Jati Bhakti Kwa Vaishnavi. Having heard this, the astonished demigods asked Vishnu, reclining on the snake bed, Lord, why is this that the hostile demons worship you? The wretched demon is of a low birth. Where is the devotion of Vishnu? Close quote.
So they're all upset because lower beings are worshiping. We're the devas. That's our thing. Let me give you an example. Whatever position you take, for example, on choice in the abortion political tension in our country. There are 5 Roman Catholic bishops who are precluding certain politicians from receiving communion as punishment. They don't believe the way we want them to believe, so we're going to punish them. But if you look to the stories of Jesus himself, tax collectors, publicans, prostitutes, the poor, as well as the wealthy and physician, all were welcome. I remember going to camps where there would be people who would be obnoxious or drunk, some even with mental illness, and other delegates there would shun them. Oh, what are we going to do about that person? I remember one specific camp, this one kind of crazy guy, and he went and had a private one-on-one session with Swamiji, who gave him his Rolex watch. So God has no taste. God loves people you and I would have nothing to do with. Hari loved the demons because they turned to him. Now, the invitation you and I are enjoying to love as God loves. Any thoughts on this? And always remember, churches, temples, ashrams, monasteries are never bastions of sainthood. They're hospitals for souls. So if you have an expectation that someone who's involved in spiritual community or has this job, that they're going to have perfect behavior, you don't understand yoga. We're all here because we're not all there. That's all it is. So, Hari, being God, or a form of God, loves everyone. And frequently, God will seemingly have a preference for rascals, outlaws, fallen women. Years ago in the mid 80s, I was working, I was singing at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And the dean of the cathedral, Alan Jones, was a specialist in spiritual direction. He did quite a bit of it. And one time, one Sunday, he just said the most remarkable thing. He said, when I counsel priests, monks, and nuns, they talk about sex. When I counsel prostitutes, they talk about God. Isn't that interesting? So, every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. Going on.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Vibudha ma Vishnunastata Prahalado Bhaktiman iti Paschatyam Janma Tasyedam Moksharho Sau Arivadam Gunavan Nirguno Jata Ityanartha Kramam Viduhu Nirguno Gunavan Jata Ityahu Siddhidam Kramam. The Blessed Lord said, wise ones, let you not be dejected that Prahlada is devout. This is his final birth or incarnation. That subduer of enemies is worthy of liberation. A virtuous person has become bad. They know this is an evil course. A person devoid of good qualities has become virtuous. They call this a fulfilling or emancipating course.
Yes. So for you and me, we may have come from a good family, may have had a Brahmin birth, but if we squander this life by developing low habits, becoming more and more entangled in the world, we've wasted a life. But someone may come from a very low birth from the standpoint of caste. Prove that in the modern language. Someone may come from real trouble as a family of origin. But from this salvific principle, we're driven to move towards the infinite. I think one of our great examples of this is Oprah Winfrey. Have any of you ever heard her talk about what her upbringing was like? Terrible, terrible violence, sexual abuse. She's a pretty woke woman and has contributed a lot to the society. So you can never tell. It's not our job to judge other people. This is the big lesson. So, Prahlada, no matter what his birth was as a demon, he's filled with devotion. So Krishna says this is his final birth. He's going to attain liberation. Going on.
Prahaladam pratigirvana tata snigdha dhatvatvam ayayuhu. Then the demigods attained to friendliness towards Prahalada.
So, understanding this, the great brotherhood, sisterhood, the fellowship of all sentient beings. Proud devas, understanding Lord Vishnu's teaching, had open-heartedness, kindness to all people. Now, let me share with you one of the things that helps with that. Usually, when we have been through adversity and tragedy, we can identify with, we can have empathy with someone else who suffers. Give you a real life story. So most of us, if we're walking down the street and we see a drunk passed out in the doorway, we kind of like shut our eyes, shut our mind, and walk on. I was with a fellow named Ray in San Francisco. We're going back 37 years. It's the first week of May, 37 years ago. And we were walking down Guerrero. And there was a wino in the gutter, in the doorway, actually. Now, Ray had been a wino. Many, many years of sobriety. And he stopped, he knelt down, shook the man's shoulder, said, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Just fine. But what struck me and humbled me, because I would have just walked on, was his ability and willingness to treat this man with dignity as a suffering human being. And as we walked on, he said, "There lies another perfectionist," which I thought was a very interesting description. So the teaching that's implied here, can you begin to perceive the fundamental brotherhood, sisterhood of all humanity? No high, no low, no smarter, no dumber. To give up much of our unexamined sense of entitlement. It's radically political in many ways. Any thoughts on this before we go on? Next one.
Manasa karmana vacha prahalado bhaktimanapi yakta bhogadi kalana vishrantim anupagatah. Though Prahalada was devout in thought, deed, and word, and was one who had given up seizing enjoyments in the life, he did not obtain tranquility.
So, even though he's developed a predominantly sattvic personality, still, he was not free. He did not obtain complete tranquility. Let's see what his next step is. Going on.
तां स्थितिं तु परिज्ञात्वा तस्य पूजागृहं ययौ विज्ञाय पूजया देवं सम्पूज्य द्विगुणेद्धया प्रह्लाद परमप्रीतो गिरा तुष्टावपुष्टया. Hari, or Lord Vishnu, having indeed known that state or condition, went to his house of worship. Having known the god Hari by his worship, and having adored him with twofold refulgence or an ardor, Prahalada, extremely delighted, praised him by rich words or adoration.
So there's Prahalada in the temple worshiping Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu takes compassion on him and shows up. Dude, here I am. Let's see what happens. Going on.
Shri Bhagwan Uvacha Varam Grihanate Bhuyo Janma Dukkho Pashantaye. Blessed Lord said, take this boon for the cessation of your numerous births and misery.
So, how do we get God's grace? We invoke it. One of the oldest names for God we have in Hinduism is Surya, the sun. I like it because it's the nature of the sun to shine. It just does it. Provides life, light, heat, warmth, vitality for everything on the planet. Worms and germs, dogs and frogs, good people, bad people. But you and I, if we choose, can stay and hide inside, close all the drapes, or stay up all night and sleep all day. The sun isn't punishing us, but we have to avail ourselves of its goodness. There's the old saying, if you don't feel close to God, who moved? The love of God is a constant. How do we invoke the love of God? So my friend Ron, a couple weeks ago, got up in the morning to start his car, wouldn't start. Opens the hood, battery's dead. It had been so long since he looked at it. The battery cables were so corroded, they were absolutely fused to the battery terminals. This is much more of an East Coast thing than in California because of the cold and the wet and stuff. So he thought he was going to have to replace the cables and stuff like that. So he had a friend who was able to clean them, sniff off the old things, put on new, clippy thingies, got a new battery, clip, vroom, there goes the car. So the spiritual force of God, Mother Shakti, which gets inside of us and heals us. Technical term is Shakti. But the human mind can be like those battery cables. We can corrode it. How? with egoism. Mighty mind, greed, fear, resentment, anger, selfishness. That's all the crud. So our devotion gets out the wire brush. Peppers. Now the power is always there. We have to open to it. That's our job. We invoke. Any thoughts on this? Understand, God is not neurotic. God doesn't wake up in the morning and say, I just don't like the way Puneet's parting his hair today. I'm going to send him tribulation. There is no such God. The love of God, the mercy of God, the compassion of God, the healing power of God is a constant. It is like sunlight. It doesn't mean you're going to hit all the green lights of life, but it does mean we can meet those calamities with serenity, peace. Now, what if worshiping God, surrendering to God, I just don't have that temperament? What do? In Viveka Chudamani, after Shankara goes through the qualifications of a fit student, he then says, others say that bhakti alone is supreme. Any of you remember that section? Then what does he say? The constant attempt to live up to our true nature is also considered bhakti or devotion. Doesn't mean you need to sing and dance and chant the Lord's name, or stand on street corners and hand out flowers, or be all emotional and sentimental and evolved and involved in that way emotionally. Some of us don't have a temperament like that, but you can be devoted to the ideal of your own awakening and put in the time, put in the effort, and that too is devotion. Any thoughts or questions on this?
This seems appropriate to what I was asking you about at the beginning of the class.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
Exactly. And I didn't say it, Mark. It was Shankara. Because Shankara, his work is aimed at intellectuals. Vedanta is a non-intellectual path for intellectuals. But here we're talking about bhakti. All right, going on.
Prahladavacha yat udaratamam vetsi tadevadisha me vibho. Lord, point out to me only that which you consider as most exalted.
So what's the best method? What's the best way for me to worship God, to serve God, or to find true peace of mind? What's the best? So Vishnu's there. Notice he doesn't say, give me a castle, Oh, finally, I want that big car. You know. He asks the right question. Let's see what the blessed Lord answers. Going on.
Sri Bhagavanuvacha, the blessed Lord said, Sarva Sambhrama Sanshantyai Paramaya Phalaya Cha Brahma Vishranti Paryanto Vicharostu Tavanadhara. Sinless one, for the complete alleviation of all confusion or error, and for the highest good, let there be reflection or inquiry into you extending up to repose or tranquility in Brahman or the Supreme Spirit.
So, what he's alluding to here is the distinction between preparatory practices and what's going to deliver the goods. So, our problem is ignorance. Action does not get rid of ignorance. So if I think of an arithmetic problem, how many jumping jacks do you have to do to know the answer to the problem? How many pilgrimages? How much puja do you need? Ask me what the arithmetic problem is.
What's the problem?
5 plus 2 is 7. So how'd you get the answer?
You did the mind.
You investigated, you asked. So here, the worship of the God, singing the Lord's praises, diet, pilgrimage, all that stuff is good because it purifies the mind and the heart. But the way we find out the truth, the way we find peace, vicharena, by means of vichara. Vichara means investigation. Comes from the root vich, which means to winnow, to separate the wheat from the chaff. Koam, who are you? Find out that. And I am Atma, Brahma. This self is Brahman. Find out what yourself is, who yourself is. And you will find out who or what Brahman is. What God is. That's what Lord Vishnu was talking about. Any questions? Many people get stuck in the preparatory practice. They do it for decades and still never find peace. Going on.
Section 2. Atma Vicharanam, the inquiry into the self. Ityakva Antahite Deve Samapyacharya Yathakramam Upavisha Yatha Daityendro Karodatma Vicharanam. Having said thus, when the Lord disappeared, the demon king Prahalada, completing his worship in due order, having sat down, carried out an investigation into the nature of the self.
So, Atma Vichara. This is our principal practice in Jnana Yoga, the tradition that we come from. In this Atma Vichara, the technique is very simple. It's discrimination between the self and the not self, between the seer and the seen, between the subject and all the objects. Now, those of you who may be into teaching, here's where it's very important to point something out. So Saundari and I can have
What
a
type of
conversation
teaching?
about the teaching we're doing.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you. My apologies. I just didn't hear anything.
You and I can have a conversation about the self as if it's some concept out there. It's like, how well do you speak French? Well, probably a whole lot better than I speak French. Like French is something out there. When we talk about the self, even with the most beginningest, can I make a word up? Student. Understand, you start with the student's direct experience. Who sees the water glass? That's yourself. That's what we want to investigate. My direct experience of me. I'm not going to find a self, become a self, acquire a self, see a self. I'm going to investigate what's always been there, me. Now, it's really simple. It's like a game. The rules of the game are this. If it has a beginning and an end, if it occurs in time and space, if it has qualities and characteristics, if it's confined to the waking, dream, or deep sleep state, if it's confined to the past, the present, or the future, and most importantly, if it can be cognized, object of experience, an object of cognition, an object of awareness, an object of perception, that isn't it. Give you a demonstration. Can you see the lamp? Everybody see the lamp? Are you a lamp? You're the one looking at the lamp. I'm the self. The lamp is not self. We can put our attention someplace else, here in the living room. Can you see the coffee table? Are you a coffee table? You're the one who sees the coffee table, not self. Now, let's see. I get beard in my mouth when I talk with a mask on. How Prahlada does his investigation into the self. Next verse.
Jagat tavatidam naham dhammam tat jadameva hi naham deho jado nashya pavane naiva visphuran. As for the world, I am not this. It is external and is indeed quite senseless. I am not the body, which by itself is senseless and destructible, moving about only by the breath of the vital energy.
So we start by things perceived with the senses. Now, he uses a term here. Did he use the term jada? I really wasn't listening that carefully.
Yeah, Jadam Eva.
Yeah. Jada means inert or insentient. You are a sentient being. You are conscious. Consciousness. With reference to me, the phenomenal world is not the locus of sentience. I see the coffee table. The coffee table with reference to me is inert, it's insentient. It's not self-luminous. Even other people, I see Mahip. With reference to me, he does not illumine himself. I illumine Mahip's body over there. Now, again, this is an abridgment, so he's covering a lot of territory in very few verses. The next level that we go to, after we've seen that all the phenomena in the material world is objective phenomena, we go to the body itself. Now, the body is the root of ego identification. It's called the bija vasana, the seed attachment. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, let's see if the body is an object of cognition. When you were a child, you had a little body. Through adolescence, and your body changed. You became an adult and your body has changed again. You gain weight, you lose weight. You feel energized, you feel sick. But are not you aware of the body and all its changes? Go find a photo of yourself when you're 10 years old. Where did that body go? Gone. But you are a constant. You've been aware of all the changes in the body. And you were also aware of the prana, the energy that causes the body to do all this stuff. So you guys had a big meal tonight?
Yeah.
Did you feel kind of sluggish afterward?
Yes.
Prana goes to your belly, digest. So you feel the prana rise and fall, your energy level rise and fall. But you are aware of energy. Now, why is this important to point out? There are a lot of people who think God's energy. You go to some particular event and there's a lot of power and shakti, people shaking and stuff like that. Oh, I have all this energy in my body. Is that it? It's fine. That's not it. It's a modification of value. That's all it means. comes and it goes. It rises and it falls. But when there's a lot of energy flowing through your body, even in an ecstatic experience, who is aware of it? You are not. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Yes, I'm
Please
sorry.
go ahead.
I keep on coming back to this with everyone, this specific thing that I'm not the body. And it's very, I like what I heard a professor say, that 10 out of every 11 cells in my body are nothing but bacteria. And once every 7 years, almost every single cell in my body is replaced. And that really goes very well with this scripture, I believe. Like, I'm not this body. It is that constant aging process, is the replacement of it. And as you said, we witness it all. To me, it goes very well with
Correct.
us.
Yes. Next verse.
Jadaya Karna Shulkalya Kalyamana Shanakshayi Shunya Kriti Shunya Bhava Shabdonaham Achetanaha. I am not the inanimate sound which is brought about by the senseless auditory passage, decaying in a moment of the form of void and originating in void.
So now he's going to move through the senses. So the sounds we hear, I am nothing I hear. Going on.
Tvacha Shanavishat Chintya. Tvacha Shanavinashinya Prapyo Yamanthaya Chinta Prasado Palabdhatma Sparshonaham Achetanaha. I am not the touch which is not conscious, which is attainable and is also not attainable otherwise by the skin perishing in a moment, and which is of the nature of the experience obtained by the brightness or clearness of intelligence or the conscious mind.
Yes. So he's going to go through all 5 senses, which are illumined by the mind. When the mind is not attending to the senses, we can't really say the senses operate. So, have you ever been deeply engrossed in a book and you don't hear the traffic outside? Or you're busy on the computer and your spouse says, dinner's ready, and you don't hear it. It's only when the mind is connected with the senses that sense perception takes place. Going on.
Drishya Darshanayo Linam Shayi Shana Vinashesho Kevale Drishtari Shinam Rupam Naham Achetanam. I am not the form which is not conscious, which is resting on the seen and the seeing that are decaying and perishable in a moment, and which is lost or destroyed in the mere or isolated seer.
Yes. So I am none of the things seen, nor am I the sense of seeing itself. Going on.
Labdhatma Jihvayatucho Lola Shanika Sattaya Swalpa Spando Dravyanishto Rasonaham Achetanaha. I am not the taste which is not conscious, which has obtained its character through the tongue, which is trifling or insignificant due to its changing and momentary experience, which is of very little or brief movement and which depends on the relevant substance.
Yes. So the tongue can taste sweet, sour, pungent, etc. All those tastes go by. but I am not the sense of taste. Going on.
Nasaya pyantha jadaya shaniya parikalpitaha pelavo niyatakaro gandho naham achetanaha. I am not the smell which is not conscious, which is determined by the perishable nose that is utterly senseless, and which is of slender and indefinite identity.
So same idea, I'm not anything scented. Is nasaya by means of the nose?
Yeah.
We get nasal from the same root.
Yeah.
Interesting. Going on.
Nirmamo manana shanto gata panchondriya brahmaha shuddha chetana evaham kala navarjitaha chetya varjita chinmatram ahamesho vabhasakaha sabhrama bhantara vyapi nishkala mala sanmayah a idanim smritam satyam etat tat akhilam maya. I am free from the sense of mind, that is free from connection with the outer world, free from thinking and calm, with the whirling or confusion of the five senses gone. I am only pure consciousness without parts and reckoning. I am this luminous perception which is just pure consciousness without objects to be cognized.
So
I pervade inside and outside, full of being or existence, pure and undivided. Ah, this very truth has been remembered by me now in full.
yes. So then he goes, I'm not the feelings of the mind. I'm not the thoughts of the intellect. Who is it who knows the thoughts and even the space between the thoughts? My consciousness. Which is birthless, changeless, deathless. Consciousness is inside, outside, pervades everything. Now, we don't create the self, become the self, achieve the self. We realize that we've always been. That realization takes place in the subtle intellect. Now, here's a secret. We're dealing with two kinds of knowledge here. The first knowledge is the perfect knowledge, the only knowledge that's real with a capital R. How do you know you are you? You do not see, hear, taste, touch, smell, emote, or think yourself. Yet you know you are. The self is its own means of knowledge. The instrument for the direct experience of the self is the self itself. And the great cosmic joke is you've always had it. It's nothing new. But when the subtle intellect reflecting on this has the insight, the aha. Technical term is pratya vijnana, recognition. That is when the buddhi, the subtle intellect, becomes buddha, woke. And that doesn't change the self either. the end, self-evidence of the self is the only knowledge that's real. Everything else occurs in Maya, including your stupid realization. Any thoughts on this? So, how many more to this section?
A few more, at least.
All right, we'll stop here. It's 9 o'clock.
Can I get the
Oh,
verse we're starting
pardon?
at? Can I get the exact verse we left off at?
We're going to do 24, 26.
24, 26? Okay, sorry to bother you. Thank you.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Sri Guru Namaha Hari Om. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
When do you head back to Santa Barbara?
Tomorrow during noon.